So can you tell me who you are and tell me about your relationship to Red Drop Resources?
Sure. My name is Bethany Moen, and a few years ago I joined the board of directors. And after a few months, I had the opportunity to take a paid position as the office and events coordinator for Red Drop, and I've been doing that for about a year and a half now.
And my name is Peter Moen, and I joined the board of directors in the fall of 2020. In March of 2014, I came down with what I thought were flu-like symptoms, and ultimately I went to my family medicine doctor to get checked out. They did some blood tests and found out that along with my fever and night sweats and cold chills, that I had real low white blood cell counts, and so I was admitted to St. Mary's Hospital. From there, they did a CT scan which found bulky tumors in my lower abdomen region and said that they need to run more tests and thought that I had some form of lymphoma. After about 3 weeks, they told me that I was diagnosed with T-cell, histiocyte-rich, large B-cell, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that I would have to go through a chemo regimen.
So do you want to tell me a little bit about your living situation at the time?
Sure. We, at that time, were living with my in-laws, Peter's parents. He had just graduated seminary, and we had 2 daughters, and had just found out right before he got sick that I was pregnant with our third. And so we were lucky to be living with them, and we were only about 3 or 5 minutes away from the Mayo Clinic. And having a bunch of family close by, as well as living with them, was really huge. We had a great support system around us for what was to come. It just became more natural to start taking care of the people around me at that moment. Some could say that's a part of nesting, being pregnant at the time, where I just started taking care of him and making sure he had what he needed and taking care of each of my kids and what they needed.
So you had great social support. You were already in Rochester, so you're fortunate to be close to the Mayo Clinic. Do you want to talk about how you started out in your treatment?
Sure. I went through a treatment regimen called RCHOP, and that regimen lasted 6 cycles, and each cycle was 3 weeks long. To start out each cycle, I would go into Mayo Clinic and have a 6-hour infusion of chemotherapy, which ended with the P in RCHOP, which was prednisone, where I was given 240 milligrams for 5 days in a row, and then I would have to stop cold turkey. Throughout the process, my body really started to get sick, literally, of taking this chemotherapy because it was wreaking such havoc on my body. So in August 2014, some family and friends decided to host a fundraiser for me in the form of a craft fair. One of my friends knew of Kristina Wright-Peterson, who was just starting up an organization called MedCity Foundation, which is now known as Red Drop Resources. So Kristina came with a booth and had some information about helping blood cancer patients in the Rochester area. Turns out that Kristina remembered me from Mayo High School because we attended at the same time. So that was a real neat connection point. 6 weeks after my last chemotherapy cycle, I went in for a PET scan and found out that I still had a form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. My hematologist couldn't tell me whether it was a mutation or a resistant strain of lymphoma against that chemotherapy. I had to go in for second-line treatment, which included a new type of chemo regimen called ICE, and that was going to help shrink the lymphoma enough to prepare me for a bone marrow transplant.
We were pretty lucky that just after he finished his ICE treatments, Emma came, and it came in between everything before he got into the bone marrow transplant.
Preparing for another round of chemo cycles, and you just had your third daughter. That's a lot.
It is.
Okay. So in order to eradicate this lymphoma, I had to go through a high-dose chemotherapy regimen called BEAM protocol in order to then go to the bone marrow transplant. And this is the third regimen of chemotherapy that I had to go through. One of the nice things for me was that I was able to use my own stem cells in my bone marrow transplant. And so that helped me avoid a lot of complications. December 1st, 2014 was considered day zero for me as a bone marrow transplant patient. That was the day that I was going to receive the stem cells that were previously harvested from my body. The bone marrow transplant process is fairly simple, but it is a very traumatic experience on the body. It was a fairly innocuous process. It's like a blood transfusion of sorts.
So we were pretty happy that Peter's bone marrow transplant happened right around the time of Christmas. And so we all got to start that season out with some exciting news. It also lent us to having a bit of hope as we looked forward to celebrating together with family. And it was a good step towards the end of this very long process of cancer.
The bone marrow transplant was a huge day for me because that was the day that I was considered to be in remission. And that was also the day that I could start looking forward to becoming stronger and more active in life and with my family.